All right, podcast filming time. Welcome to the extraordinary YouTube series. It's not really a podcast because I don't put it on the proper podcast streams, but maybe I will on this one. This week we're going to talk about, I was listening to the episode yesterday on the Chris Williamson podcast with Ned Brockman, and they were talking about the amazing feat that he achieved, I think a couple of weeks ago in October, I think it was, or November. Where he ran 1,000 miles around an athletics track. And it got me thinking, because one of the things I've been sort of toying with lately, in this year I've read David Goggins' book, fully aware of all of the feats that guys like Ross Edgley do. And then this Ned Brockman conversation came up and it made me think, and it makes me think all the time, because we live in an area where a lot of people do the Ironman, or a lot of people sign up for marathons or half marathons or 10K runs. And I really just think that those things are fantastic for getting us moving, getting us challenged, just like in the same way that other sort of extrinsic motivators, or those sort of those finite challenges work. Things like the challenges at gyms, 30-day challenges, 60-day challenges, 2-week challenges, all of these things are so successful, but yet they're not solving the big picture or the big problem. There are many other people that I know who do these challenges and then that ends and then it's over. And if you do any of the happiness research in regards to these things, it's that these short-term bursts of extreme sacrifices are not causing the end result of happiness that we're sort of chasing. And it's mostly the reason why I've been toying with this idea is because it's something that I battle with a lot. Like, I don't set challenges, I set daily tasks and habits. And I'm not saying that I'm right or wrong, but it's through not having to, basically, I think pushing against these types of activities is what's caused me to really think about this myself. Because we glorify the very big challenge, but forget about how much sacrifice goes into these extreme challenges. And I started yesterday's blog post with a disclaimer saying that, like, one of my closest friends, one of my biggest supporters, who's always likes my stuff online, he is an avid Ironman, and I think he's found his identity in this. He has his own reasons for doing these types of activities, but he didn't do one and then stop. Like, it's part of what he does on a daily basis. So as much as I do strength and conditioning, I do CrossFit, my identity is doing that style of training. His is these long runs, long swims, long endurance events. And I haven't spoken to him about this, but I do wonder, like, I caught up with him last week, and, you know, his family wasn't with him. Do they choose not to go with him? Is it a big day? He's got a young family too. So I could imagine, just like when we go to CrossFit competitions, taking your kids to those things is a big deal. It doubles the cost of going to those events. So all of a sudden now you take just not only that, but that then adds a bigger sacrifice to what you're trying to achieve in there. So I also wrote a piece a couple of weeks ago for Maddie, and I don't know where I've saved it. And it was talking about how in life, wait, I need to bring this back up. So I got asked the question the other day of what do I think the mental health state is like in our area, and this was for Maddie for her course, and we sort of discussed it and divulged it, and then I wrote a piece for myself and then sort of elaborated on it for the blog post. And I think when you think about the reason behind doing a lot of these things, and again, take this back, like, people should be doing hard things. They should be searching for discomforts. And I like the fact that people are doing that in health realms. But can we find those discomforts in a lot simpler tasks or terms is what I'm sort of looking at. Because to me, the state of mental health is the fact that the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've ever looked into that, is that the two bottom rungs, we are completely self-sufficient at those two rungs. That we do not need to concern ourselves with food, water, and shelter. We are safe. You can walk the streets in our today's society and feel safe. So from there, the main thing that we then suffer with is a lack of self-esteem, a lack of purpose, and then that drives up into a sense of self-actualization. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you've never seen it before, I'm just going to pull it up here so I don't misquote it. But basically, the bottom rungs are physiological needs, so food, water, shelter. We all have those. Then it's safety needs. Now, from there, the next rung is loving and belonging. So friendships, intimacy, family, sense of connection, and then the self-esteem is above that. That then turns into self-actualization, which is the desire to become the most that one can be. Now, if we have very wide bases of that hierarchy of needs, so say we're somebody who makes six figures, who has a house, there's no chance it's going to go. So we've got enough money, we basically buy shit that we don't need. But yet I think intimacy is probably the one, or a sense of connection, that feels a lot lost in a lot of people. And particularly with the high rate of separations that we see in marriages, blended families, because we quote unquote fall out of love with each other, is because of that fact that with that wide psychological need and safety needs being accommodated for, it means that we need a really large amount of intimacy, belonging, friendship, sense of connection with our loved ones to then make us feel more accepted. And then that sort of spirals up. In today's society, I think that is our biggest concern behind mental health. And again, to quote what I wrote yesterday, when I read Dan Williams's post on his website, I quoted him inside of this blog post saying that he wrote, there will always be problems in life. It's just about upgrading to better problems. And I think as humans, we don't quite understand what the difference is between upgrading to problems and upgrading to better problems. So what we do is we find outlets or ways to really drive ourselves out into hard problems, like very hard things, because we have the physiological needs, we have the safety needs met. But we don't need to choose detrimental problems to solve those issues. We can find discomforts that sit inside of less sacrifice, or things that aren't going to hurt or damage other people, like getting up early, going to the gym, sacrificing donuts for fruit, sacrificing quick meals. Maybe you don't like to cook, so that's the discomfort that you could pick, because you can buy the food can be there, you just have to take 20 to 30 minutes to do it. So what you end up doing is, in today's society, the problems that we're searching for are problems that they're harder, they're more extreme, they cause more sacrifice, and in return, they make our lives worse. And I don't think we understand the difference between that until we actually start to realize or find gratitude in the good and the bad. We start to find the bad and balance that out. But chosen discomfort makes a lot more sense to me. So as I was listening to Len Brockman, or even as I've read like David Goggins' book, these guys who do these things, we glorify big sacrifices, we glorify big achievements. They have these big, bright, shiny lights around us. And I think that is also the same thing of, like, we get glorified for being the victim, but we never get glorified for being the successor. What about the person, we feel bad for the person and we give them a check-in and make sure that they're feeling good if they're going through a marriage breakup, but we never celebrate or check in and say, hey, you know what? You're an inspiration to the person who's been married for 30 years. It's almost expected that if they're doing that sort of stuff, that it's expected that's okay, or a bit of that tall poppy syndrome of saying, like, well, good for them, but what about this person who's struggling? We are very quick to glorify the struggle, and we very rarely glorify those who have stuck it out doing the hard thing for a longer period of time. Another example that I used in yesterday's blog post is something like drinking, or choosing to not eat a dessert, or not pick from a plate at a party. All of a sudden, if you decide to not drink, people will ask you, what's wrong with you? One won't hurt, all these sort of things. But you get drunk, no one bats an eyelid. For the fact that the next day you're not going to wake up in a cripple. We don't laugh at the person who wakes up tomorrow, making a song and dance about the person who doesn't drag themselves around, need a McDonald's drink, is sick, has to sleep the whole day away. We accept that behavior from somebody who's hungover, but yet the person who chooses to not drink to avoid that hangover, we don't glorify that kind of behavior. And it's a backwards way of looking at success. So to wrap this up very tightly into a bow, and I just was sort of ranting basically on this one, I think the main thing that we really need to concern ourselves with is when we're looking at the problems that we have, is really look at, can we upgrade ourselves to better problems that are self-chosen, problems that are there that we pick and choose to do, that are still hard and they still cause discomfort, but they don't have to hurt or damage anybody else. Things like, if instead of us having to do an Ironman that's going to take a couple of 8-hour rides, a full day off on a Saturday, and force you to then be up and out before the sun rises and the sun sets, can we just get up and do the 1-hour class in the morning? Can we, instead of having to argue with our partners, or they're not giving us enough of this, or they're not enough that, and I've fallen out of love with them, can we start to work on ourselves and do the damaging thing of self-identifying that we actually are damaged ourselves? We are human beings, none of us are perfect. That can we work on ourselves to then realize that maybe we can be the ones who then spiral into creating a better relationship with our partners, our chosen spouses, instead of just forfeiting the pain and saying like, well, fuck this, I'm over it, and then jumping out of that ship, and then that causes more sacrifice. Like, you think that you're going to end up happier in the long run, but is that really going to be the case? We find such big sacrificial shifts when really we could just find other ways to be uncomfortable within ourselves. And if it is really, truly a godsend that we get to choose our problems in the modern society, and that it's not forced upon us to go hungry, it's not forced upon us to be thirsty, it's not forced upon us to be unsafe. We have that part mapped out as part of being in the modern society. It's part of being in a democracy. It's part of being in the world that we live in. But yet we still find faults, we still find holes, and yet we still want to fight with other people about things that mean nothing and have nothing to do with anything that we can change, when really we could just change the things inside of us. If we can think of it that way, I think we'd end up with a whole better world that we live in for ourselves. That, to me, is what living in heaven looks like on this side of death, compared to living in a hell. And I hope that somebody can take that away, that we don't need to look at these big things, when really we could just find some simpler discomforts to do better for ourselves, and do what's right, and make sure that we live in a better planet, live in a better place, and live somewhere that we would all love to be.